Hello. Welcome
Hello.
to the Tru Conscious Couple podcast. I am Tiffany Lancaster.
And I'm Brad Lancaster. We are a blended family. When we got together, I had 4 kids, Tiffany had 3, and we've had 1 together.
We're also a couple that runs a business together.
And so we talk about those things. We talk about our journey of self-discovery, of self-improvement.
We talk about the struggles of blended families. We talk about the struggles of business. And we talk about the struggles of doing inner work.
And we also talk about the joy, the peace, the love that comes along with all of that.
And what makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, so come along for the ride.
Hope you enjoy.
All right, this is episode 24 of the Tru Conscious Couple podcast.
Oh, yeah.
That's my radio voice.
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
You didn't know I had that, did you?
No,
Welcome and thank you. Okay, so we're joined by, we're excited. Tiff had this idea that we would have all of our kids because this podcast has turned into a discussion about blended families, about relationship and consciousness.
Yeah, and I figured what better way to give our audience perspective on how we've handled our blended family situation than straight from the mouths of the babes.
Yeah. And so today we are joined by Trinten. Trinten is Tiffany's oldest son.
He's also like the behind the scenes with our podcast. So it made sense to have him come on first since he is quite literally like here every time we're recording a podcast.
Yeah, every time I'm just behind the cameras. I actually have to do the maintenance work on the cameras, restart them every so often because they have a 30-minute stoppage time that I have to seamlessly stop and start the camera.
And then edit on the back
and
end.
then edit out. But I love doing it. I'm happy to be here.
Trinten is also, he does the majority of our videography, our photo work, does the majority of our editing for social media, for YouTube, does all of our photography work for our real estate business. He also is our number 1 babysitter. Has taken care of Junior and Taylin whenever we've done date nights for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been married for 10 years, right?
Mhm.
No. I met you when I was 11, 12.
9.
9? Is that
No,
real?
10. You had just turned 10, actually, when I
Yeah.
met you. Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
22 and we've been together 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So tell everyone like where you're at in the family. Brad already said he's my son from my first marriage.
Oh, well, I am your oldest. You had me when you were 18, right?
And this is Tiffany that you're talking about.
Tiffany,
Yeah.
yes. And I am then the 3rd oldest in all 8 of us, which is pretty good. I am the oldest single sibling.
Oh, that's true.
I take pride in that. Everyone else is getting married,
Yeah.
not me. So that's good. Yeah.
So we wanted to get started just so we can help our listeners get a little point of reference. So
Right.
I think it's important that we start off like from the very beginning. Tell us like what it was like for you growing up in your first family, one where your mom and your birth father were there, where Brandon was there.
Well, I was, you and my dad got divorced when I was 9. I remember that pretty vividly. I don't have a great memory of my childhood. I mean, I have good memories, but thinking back, I have only very sparse memories of what's happening. Like in my experience, it felt like I met my dad when I was 4 or 5 because he was deployed active duty when I was like 2 to 4. Is that right?
Yeah, it was like 2 to 3.5. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he was there for your 4th.
Right.
Missed your 3rd.
Right. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But in your memory, you were like 4 or 5 years old when
4
you met
or
your
5
dad.
when I met my dad. It was the first time. Before that, earliest memories was just me hanging out with my mom all day, just me and her. I got all of her attention. So I was a mama's boy way back then, and then switched when my dad came back into my life. And then I was a dad's boy for a while, for a long time. that period in my life, mom was doing all the working, and my dad worked too, but he tried to be the fun parent all the time. Come home and play with us. It gave us lots of attention. Gave me lots of attention. I remember that he was way more childish. He would always not play the adult role. He always was being the child of your guys' relationship. I remember that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys got divorced when I was 9, which I was grateful for.
Just tell us about that.
Just because I knew that it was inevitable with how often you guys were fought, how bad the fights were. And I just knew that I saw the suffering all the way around. And I didn't know what the solution was way back then, but I knew it wasn't good how it was with you two together. I remember several instances that were terribly traumatic.
Yeah.
But like for example, one, you talk closer.
Yeah, stay there close.
Yeah.
You keep going back out and then back in, so I think it might it affects the sound. It sounds far away and then close and then far away and then close.
Yeah, for sure. What was I saying? Memories. I remember there's several instances that were pretty tough situations. I remember one of the very first one when I was like, okay, something definitely needs to change. Actually, take that back. The one that I remember most vividly was when was either on Memorial Day or your dad's birthday, that we were driving out to Midway, right? I'm telling the story properly. And we were going to go visit your father's grave. And I remember
I just want to give you a caveat that and you already know this, but you don't have to go into any super traumatic memories. You can if you want, if you're comfortable with it, but don't feel pressured to have to do that.
Right. No, I remember that you guys started fighting on the car ride. It's like what, a 3-hour drive to Eureka, an hour drive, something like that.
Yeah.
It felt forever when I was a little kid. And you guys just fought. And then I remember like you got left behind, and you left the car, and Dad started driving away, and I was like, this is not good. So I remember that. And then I just remember it being not good that you guys were together. I remember it would be way better if you guys separated. I didn't know what that was going to look like. Obviously, I was only 9 years old, but
I don't know if you know this or not, but that was actually the moment that I like came up with the plan in my head of leaving your dad.
Right.
And it was shortly after that I did. If my memory serves me right, like when we got home, I took Taylin to go get a coffee right after we got home and went to Julie's that night. So yeah, that would make sense that fight, and it was Memorial Day.
Yeah. I remember that one was particularly bad. It wasn't the worst, but that one was bad.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, man, this is not good. Mom needs to do something about this. I didn't know what needed to be done. I kind of thought that I would, way back then, I thought I would end up living with my dad's family just because I had way more family where he's concerned versus I wasn't as close to your family just because your dad passed away. And I only have ever really known your sister, Sherry, personally from your side of the family. I've never really I still don't even really understand the dynamics of that whole family on your side, just because we've never been too close to them. We have some distant cousins but we were never that close growing up with that side of the family. So I always thought I would just be a Dunn. Yeah. Go with the Dunn family. So, I mean, I still am really close with them, but it's just
your grandmother and grandfather are amazing grandparents. Your on your father's side, your grandma Ruth is one of the most loving, generous people I've ever met.
I'd have to agree.
Yeah.
We actually have a great relationship with the Dunns, your dad's family.
Right. They're
though
coming over
he's
tomorrow, right?
yeah, the
The
little
cousins
kids.
are coming
Yeah.
over tomorrow. Yeah. Junior, your youngest, super close with my cousins. They're
Yeah.
his cousins too at this
Right.
point, you know?
Hasn't always been that way. It's been a journey, but I'm super grateful for those relationships now.
Yeah. Both sides, you and the Dunn family did some amazing work to get to that point.
Right.
The overriding theme on that, by the way, has been as somebody watching it, because I mean, even though I've been a part of it, I've been more watching it than really being a part of it. Tremendous amount of love on both sides for you guys,
Right.
for the kids, and so that's a good central theme, especially for blended families.
Yeah.
Like focusing on the kids that are a part of it, that had nothing to do with marriages failing or whatever else happened.
Right. And I even remember talking to my grandma and grandpa pretty early on. Because, I mean, he said, good, bad. You were the bad guy for a little while, Brad.
Me? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was just how it was.
Sure.
I mean, when we were in the thick of it, like all kinds of emotions. But I remember even early on, grandma and grandpa were like, I can't have too many people loving my grandchildren, which was just really cool. And
that is a good thing. So there's not an excess of love out there.
Right.
Anybody who wants to love you, we're open to that.
Well, I was going to say, I think Ruth and Greg have been a great example of just always showing the kids so much love. I feel like they're that way with their kids. They're like that with their grandkids. Like they're just such a great example of that.
Yeah.
I've told Ruth this multiple times, which is really kind of cool. She was my example of how to be a mom, actually. Like when I think about, who inspired me into the mom that I wanted to be, she's definitely the top of the list.
Yeah.
Pretty good. She's amazing. So, so when your mom left your dad, you weren't terribly surprised. You've told me multiple times you knew it was the right thing to happen.
Yeah, I remember for sure. I was pretty much counting down the days when I was a younger kid for that to happen. I knew it was inevitable.
And you were almost relieved, right?
So yeah, totally relieved. I was thinking this is going to be a great thing. I won't have to be around all this negative energy all the time.
Because you loved your mom. You loved your mom and you loved your dad. But we got a beep going. Is that one of the cameras or is that your phone?
That was one of the cameras. It was the GoPro.
Oh.
I don't know why I did that.
Okay. We'll just keep going. So you loved your mom. You love your mom. You loved your dad. You love your dad. But you knew they weren't good together.
Yeah.
And even as a 9-year-old kid, you knew that. So that's actually that's a good lesson for parents that are staying together in a toxic relationship and you think you're doing it for your kids. That's not the case.
No, not at all.
Right? Because if you're in this toxic relationship where there's no love and there's bickering or fighting or worse,
right,
the kids know it.
Right. They're a lot more aware of what's going on than you give them credit for. You think you can hide it from your kids, like, oh, let's not fight in front of the kids. That's like a pretty common tactic that parents use. I don't think that really protects them any.
No.
I think it would be much better just to lay it all out there and display what it actually looks like to work through that as adults,
which is what we do,
right?
For the most part. Sometimes when we have to have discussions, we'll go behind closed doors, but almost always we let everybody know about what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I interrupted.
There are some things that are not age appropriate, obviously.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about, like, because I'm not obtuse to the fact that it was very hard for you in the beginning, and I was definitely painted as, like, the bad one in the relationship, and I was kind of outnumbered in the beginning because all of your dad's family, definitely they stood by their son, which is expected. But talk a little bit about, like, when I introduced you to Brad and when you first met Brad.
Right.
How was that for you?
That's funny. That was a question I wanted to ask too.
So I actually met Brad and then didn't consciously meet him until another time because you guys told me that I met him at Trax, the bar. I remember Ralphie more than Brad at that time. I remember meeting Ralphie and being like, wow, that's a big dude.
So I just want to give a little bit of perspective because you mentioned Trax in the bar. So that's actually where Brad and I met. I was bartending part-time and Brad was bouncing part-time at a bar when we met. And for me, I was really highly dependent on the tips and the income that I made to make ends meet. I had another job. And then when I got divorced, I ended up not being able to keep my day job because it was actually with someone from Brandon's family, and I just wasn't comfortable there anymore. So when I left Trinten's dad, that was my only source of income.
Right.
And that was also used against me because, it's not ideal, but it paid the bills. So.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yes. So I remember going to Trax and meeting some people there. I remember there just being a bunch of dudes that were big dudes. And I remember Ralphie most vividly just because he's a big dude.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually consciously meet Brad. I'm sure you greeted me, but I was just a little kid. Until we went and had dinner at the Chinese restaurant that is no longer open on Main Street in Tooele. I remember they had fish, the aquarium, and I remember meeting you, and I'm like, this is weird. But that was when I first met you. I was pretty indifferent about you at the beginning. I was like, oh, cool. Mom's got a boyfriend. And then flash forward to when we were all living together in Overlake. That's really the next spot that my memory picks up. And you were around a lot. You were there all the time. And then that was when real adjusting and work was put in, right? You didn't really mentor me at all until I was, probably older, until we moved to the second house in Overlake, right? Before that, we were pretty much on eggshells.
Yeah.
It was my kid, your kid kind of thing.
For sure.
But then when we finally moved to the second house in Overlake, that was when.
So for perspective, that was like the first year. Was that a full year?
It was a year. Yeah, we lived in the first house for a year.
Yeah.
Right. And probably still pretty indifferent about you, I think. I mean, I didn't mind you. I remember a lot of stories being told on both sides of that because that was still pretty fresh right in that time frame. And then we didn't even really start in connecting much until I started playing guitar. I think you guys bought me a guitar for my 13th birthday.
12th actually.
12th birthday, yeah. Right? And it was an acoustic guitar, if I remember.
Mm-hmm.
An acoustic guitar.
That's ironic. An acoustic piano comes down.
Right. Was that my Ibanez guitar? Or did you buy me an electric guitar before that?
Oh, we actually did buy you a little
electric guitar. That's
that
what
little
I
black
learned.
and white
Right.
first act thing.
Right. I pawned that guitar.
Yeah, it was garbage.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. But that was
it wouldn't stay in tune.
No.
It was
That's
so
the
obnoxious.
first one that we got.
That was the first guitar you got me. And you taught me a few chords. And that was really how we first started connecting, is you bought me a guitar when I was 12. Sat on it for a long time. Like, I didn't fall in love with it until I was like, what?
Probably 14.
14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember having feelings of like resentment towards Brad, or like, did you not like him at first?
Definitely tension. I remember there being tension. I remember, especially when we lived in that second house, I lived in the basement. Everyone tells the story how I would lock Brad out of my room every time I got pissed at him. That was definitely part of it. I remember, because he was just a disciplinary figure at that point, you know. I was getting into all kinds of trouble. I was figuring my stuff out. I remember breaking a lot of things. I had this weird habit of finding something that I thought was not useful, taking it apart, and then using its parts to create other things.
Yeah.
Right. Like old clocks or
you did it with
appliances,
pens. You did it with different appliances. Yeah.
It was really messy.
Yeah.
It was really messy. It was really destructive. Sometimes you guys would get pissed because you guys would still want the things that I would break. And so
That's true.
there was a element there. And I had this whole basement room to myself that I could just cause havoc in. Way too much room.
Yeah. One of the things I can say as a stepdad, one of the things, like some of the missteps that I made there, especially with a young, like preteen and young teenage boy, and I've talked about this on the podcast, but we were at this point in our relationship where I was at odds with your dad.
Right.
Like we were basically, your dad and I was at odds with your dad, and we were, I want to say we were enemies, but pretty close.
Right.
Like I was,
at this point, you guys have already been in a physical altercation.
yeah, we had already been in a fight and threatened a couple others.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and so I considered your dad like the adversary, like he's the enemy. And I projected that on you and Javen to some extent. You more than Javen, because you were definitely Brandon's like favorite child.
I was older.
Yeah. And you had your dad's back, like
For sure.
and I struggled with that. Looking back on it, like if I had that to do over again, or for somebody who I can't do it over again, but if for somebody who's in that where you're just getting into a relationship, you're going to have you may have ill feelings towards your now partner's ex. So like that person who was with your partner. You may even see them as some adversary. Those feelings, number one, don't serve you. Like, so work through that as quickly as possible. But number two, projecting those feelings onto the child is just absolutely toxic. And what I was doing was toxic. And I can see that now. I didn't see that then, but I can see it now that I projected those, and we've talked about this, right? And,
Right. Yeah.
And so although healing is a continual journey, like this is healing we've done. And so we can talk about it, but I'll say it like right now, as I'm feeling it, I still feel the shame of having done that.
Yeah.
And, because you were innocent, you were always worthy of love. Every human is, but you especially. I mean, a 12, 13, 14-year-old boy, you're only worthy of love. You're only worthy of acceptance. You're only worthy of compassion. And as a parent, if you're going to do this step-parent thing, that's what the child deserves, whether they're your blood child or not. They are always worthy of love. They are always worthy of compassion. They are always worthy of unconditional acceptance. They are always worthy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't make it easy. I was pretty rebellious. I purposely was trying to piss you off a lot of the time. Like, I was definitely at odds with you at certain moments.
You're
Like,
definitely the one of the family that was like, kind of like, screw the man. You did not, you challenged everything, and it wasn't necessarily in a bad way. I wouldn't say you were a bad kid.
Not
You
at all.
challenged authority a lot, and you challenged us as parents because you would call us out on our shit all the time. And I think that it was probably a good thing. I think it definitely was a good thing
Absolutely,
for you
it
to
was a good
challenge us
thing.
the way that you did.
Absolutely, you've been a big part of our growth, because you had such a great way, and kids do have such a great way of shining light on inconsistencies, on hypocrisy. Like, especially you weren't afraid to call it out.
yeah, I suppose that's part of it. In hindsight, though, I definitely learned a lot from you guys. Because I remember there were times that I was like just such a little shit. Like, I would just disappear. That was mostly when I was a little bit older. But when I was really young, I remember getting punished and getting grounded and just getting into that cycle of like acting out more because I was getting grounded, right? And so then we would dig our heels in on both sides, right? And you would be like, no leaving the house. You're staying in your room 2 weeks now, 3 weeks now, 4 weeks, you want 5? You know, I remember that. And I would be like, I'm fine. I can do this all day, you know? And then the very next day I would try to leave the house, you know?
Yeah.
And that was a cycle for a while.
I do remember as your punishment, the first time Brad took you to go junk out a house, didn't he run from you or something like that?
Yeah, I said it because I think it was what it was you were leaving something a mess. You had left a
Right.
mess. I said, all right, you like messes? We're going to go clean out a foreclosed house.
Right.
And you said,
See where this leads to when you like leave such a mess all the time and what that does to houses. And so he had this idea that if he took you to these foreclosure houses, you would see what it looks like.
I
when
would
you
scare you straight.
never clean up after
I
yourself.
think particularly it was with the snacks and food and outside of the kitchen because that was something I was not used to. I would eat anywhere in the living room, like most particularly. And I remember you just had the biggest pet peeve about me eating and taking food throughout the house. You're like, consolidate the food in the kitchen. And I was like, that's a stupid rule. And so I just would not even listen to it. I didn't respect it at all. And so we would just totally butt heads where that's concerned.
And you would tell him that.
I'd be like, that's a stupid rule. And you were like, well, I've worked on houses all my life. This is my pet peeve. And I was like, that's a you problem.
it's true.
And so
Both of those are true.
But I mean, I did learn a lot through those experiences, and I did go junk out those houses. Like I remember that happening and having to learn what that hard work was like. I remember like I couldn't go in the house a couple times, and you're like, okay, just do yard work then, just pick the weeds, and the weeds were like 4 feet tall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. But I remember learning how to work really hard in that sense, you know. I remember working really hard and learning accountability and being true to my word. Those were all lessons that I had to figure out at that time in my life.
Well, it's amazing too because like there even now you're not really you don't work on the physical side of our business anymore. Like you don't work in the houses anymore, and I don't need you to because you've got talents that are used better other places. But there's this confidence that I have that if we ever have to go do physical work, because I've seen you work for a long time, that's like a base level discipline that I know we have, that if we ever have to go do work, I can count on you.
Yeah.
And it's a thing like I have with my boys. My boys know that if we have to go do work, we can go do work. We've done it before. We can do it again. And we like to find better ways to get things done. And we like to leverage our skills as much as possible. But if it's time to roll up our sleeves and get dirty, we can do that too.
Right.
It is kind of a source of pride for us.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because we ran that garden for so many years. Like that was a big thing that I picked up. I loved those memories of us working in the garden, like turning raw land into something useful. It's still a really humbling thing to do.
Yeah, it is.
So what do you think it was? Well, first of all, would you consider like what are your thoughts about our family now? Like blended family. Like how would you rate us? How well would you say we've done or not well in blending our family? Like what's your perspective on our family now?
I'd have to just recite what I said at our 10-year vow renewal. Just that it feels like we're in a movie. It feels like we're the main characters and everyone wants to be us. Like that's just how it is. Everyone loves our family. Every one of us is achieving so high. We all do so much. Like we're all so close. Everyone's like, how is that even possible? And I don't know. It's just been the journey. It hasn't always felt like that, but especially last little while, it's definitely felt like we've done a lot. We're a pretty amazing group, pretty powerful group that we've become. We're entering new chapters, obviously. We're all moving away. The new things are happening. My siblings are getting paired off. But I remember, it has felt quite like a movie, storybook. In hindsight, when we were in it, it was different. But
yeah, tell the story about like your siblings and your perspective of like growing up. Like how did that mesh? Like how did you and your siblings start to mesh? Like where for you, when did that start happening?
Yeah, I remember I did not get along with my siblings in the beginning. None of them. I remember me and Gabe were immediately at odds. which is funny because we're really close now. But yeah, I was like a skater kid. I had long hair, and he was like a jockey, sportsy kid, played football, and I was like, "Oh, you're my least favorite type of person." Before I even met him, I was like, "I don't hang out with your kinds." But after being around each other enough, we eventually played together. I remember one of the memories of us playing in our backyard at that second Over Lake house when they would come over. We played we made up a sports game that involved a kickball and a swing set that had a dual person swing set that we had in our backyard. It's
like a teeter-totter thing.
Yeah, it was this weird teeter-totter thing, and we would swing on that as fast as we could, get the whole thing to rock back and forth, and then we would throw the kickball as hard as we could at the plate of the swing and see how far we could launch it into the house, like directly at the house.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was fun. That was one of the first times that we were really united in what we were doing. We were playing together, had a game that we would play. And yeah, it was just fun. I remember it was really weird because it was just me and Javen and then Taylen for the longest time, and I was always the oldest, and now I was a middle sibling, and so that was a whole different experience, not being the oldest child. I remember sometimes getting on Gabe's nerves, just being the obnoxious younger brother, which was a thing that I never had to experience before that, right? So that was really cool. It took us a long time to really get along. I didn't even really connect with Gabe a whole lot until he came home from his mission. By the time I was 18 and he was I 18?
He was 18, you were 17.
I was 17. We didn't really start connecting until then. Behind that, it was always
kind of surface level,
an us-them kind of thing,
Well, you and Rachel had definitely connected prior to that.
We have. And we've connected, but we were never like really, really, really close.
Yeah.
I was distracted. I had a bunch of other things going on in my life. Like I remember there's a large period of my time I could care less if they were coming over or not. I had other things going on.
Yeah, and they were actually, I can remember that phase. They were actually hurt by that. Like they'd come over. They resented it a little bit because they'd come over and Trinten would take off and they'd be like, we're required to come out here and we can't go hang out with our friends because we have to spend time with this family. Well, why does Trinten get to go and hang out with friends?
Right. Yeah, I remember that. I mean, especially by the time I was like 16 to 17, I had girlfriends. I had other buddies that I was hanging out with. Probably 14 to 17, I was like out all the time. At least I was like looking for my next fun thing to do, which is funny because that's where Tay-Tay's at now, and she's 13. But yeah, I was not hanging out with my siblings a whole lot, which is funny because nowadays I'm hanging out with my siblings 6 or 7 days out of the week. So
well, and you're purposeful about it too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I've thought about this in hindsight quite a bit, actually. Like if I were to give step families, because it's like step parents have this idea, like the new couple has this idea that, our kids will get together and they're going to be best friends. Like they're close to the same age. We're going to be just one big happy family. And it's okay, I guess, to have that vision, to have that hope.
Right.
But I would just suggest,
be very patient.
Yeah, I would suggest to all parties involved that remember that everybody still gets their free will, even your children. You don't get to tell your children who they love and who they don't love, who they like and who they don't like. And the more, like the one thing I've noticed with all of our kids, the more we try to push something, say, this is what you have to like, this is what you have to experience. They're like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And you're not, I mean, you did that, but you're not unique in that.
No.
Well, I would say that for us, the thing that I was adamant about is just being consistent.
Mm-hmm.
We had our every other weekend, like we went out and did fun stuff, focus on having fun with everybody as a family, and just be consistent about that without being too attached to the expectations. But I'm curious for you, what advice would you give maybe a kid who's going through what you went through, and maybe their parents are divorced and they're a part of a step family? So I think 2 questions. What advice would you give the kid? And then what advice would you give the parents based off of your perspective and your journey?
What advice would I give to a child who is going through divorce or who's being blended into a family, really having a new parental guide in their house?
And maybe like step siblings.
And step siblings. I don't know if I would be even qualified to give any advice where that is concerned.
Well, you are, because you're an example now in our family.
You did it. Like,
And
if you could go back to yourself, like your younger self,
your 12-year-old self.
what would you tell him?
I don't know. I would just say that it would be fine. Like, not to resist it as much. I don't know. I don't really have any key advice. I mean, I don't think that I played that much of a role into getting to where we are, you know? I feel like I was along for the ride and happened to get really lucky. So
That's okay, but you said something. Don't
Yes.
worry. It's going to be okay.
try not to resist what is happening. I mean, I personally felt like I had a very cool path laid out for me. I can't promise that for everybody else,
Right.
you know?
Right.
I don't know what other people's paths are.
Right.
And I only know my paths in hindsight, right?
Right.
I had no idea.
But I think it's possible for it to be a cool experience for other people to have this, to be able to, because a family is just a family that we accept, right? Like I think about The Walking Dead, and they start calling each other families, like the
Right.
different groups that travel together because that's their chosen family. And it's basically the same idea. And so I think that your advice is perfect advice. The more you can not resist it so much and just know that it's not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be, or be
Right.
a little more open to the idea, the more you open yourself up to a really cool experience, you know?
Right. Yeah. What I was really thinking is not as easy to do these podcasts as you guys make it look. You guys
You're doing
been
great.
doing this for a while now. This is the 24th
The
episode.
24th episode. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's really just deciding, do you want to be vulnerable or not?
Right.
Do you want to really say what's on your heart, what's in your heart, and what's on your mind? Or do you not want to?
And either one's okay.
Yeah. This is what I'll say, Trinten, because I've had the benefit of, well, I do have a question for you. Number one, you said you don't think you had any part in it. You had a huge part in it. And I've witnessed you make the conscious decision to commit yourself to personal growth. You're not a victim. You don't act like a victim. You are constantly challenging yourself to take accountability. Like when I said, I just now explained what it's like to be a toxic stepdad. And then you immediately said, yeah, but I didn't make it easy on you.
Right.
You're immediately taking accountability, almost like saying, it's okay, Brad. Like you were just, like that was partly me. You were 12, 13, 14 years old. I was an adult. I was 40 years old. So like you've learned how to take responsibility for what happened, for your part in it. You've taken accountability, even as a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old. Not blame yourself, but just learn from it.
Yeah, I think you've been
That's
an
a huge
amazing
part.
example for that to everybody in our family. And I think that like your siblings and your parents, like there's so much that we look up to you for, like your level of authenticity and being able to just be who you are unapologetically, because that's the cool thing about our family is we are all different. But you completely embrace being different, like
Right.
at a
In your
different
unique
level.
self.
Yeah, I definitely felt different. I did not feel like I identified, because I mean, it seemed like Gabe and Rachel, they had each other, they had some unifying things, but I was like always off. doing my own thing. And I remember I even resented the fact that it seemed like Gabe and Rachel could get along with Javen better than I could. Like, that was a big thing I remember dealing with. Gabe was way closer to Javen than I was, and I was like, what? They just could relate on another level. I felt definitely outcasted for a while, and I was like, well, I've got my people that I can go hang out with, and so that I did. That is what I did for a large period of life, or of that time period when I was a teenager.
So if I can like steer it towards a little bit towards your healing journey.
Yeah.
Because like you've already talked about, like you witnessed a lot of trauma. You witnessed trauma in your first family. You've even witnessed and participated in trauma in our family because, like I said, I was toxic. And so by the very nature of being toxic, I created emotional wounds.
You just can't avoid them.
Yeah, you can't avoid them. You began your yogic path kind of early. I mean, you started practicing yoga. How old were you when you started?
When did I really start practicing yoga? It was before I moved, right? I moved when I was 18. So, I mean, I was probably 16 when I was really being introduced into yoga.
So
yogic path. Mom definitely introduced me to yoga, and it's probably when I was 16 while you were in jail. Mom was doing lots of yoga. She was getting yoga teacher certified that time period. And she would share some of the things. I wasn't super into it. I wasn't really connected to my body in that time period. But I was introduced to the concepts of meditation and of yoga, moving your body, breathing. So it was introduced to me when I was 16, but I didn't really engage with the practice until I was about 18 and really did it. And I moved away, and it was a really solid part of what I was doing, was doing yoga. There was also that summer.
Oh, we went to yoga or to
Wanderlust,
which that introduced me a lot to yoga. I guess that was part of it. I remember that one summer we went to yoga. Gabe and Rachel were there. Javen was there. I don't know if Sam was there.
I think so. Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely was.
And I remember we were doing all this yoga, and they would tell us that there would be an emotional release associated with the yoga, right? And before you actually experience that, you have no idea what they're talking about. You're like, emotional release. Yeah, right. Okay. From moving my body.
Right.
And we didn't actually experience that until we were walking around the park, and somehow turmoil started building, right? I don't even remember what about or what the details of it were, but then all of a sudden we're all fighting so bad,
which was not typical for us. I think it was probably the one and only time we'd ever gotten into like a big family fight.
Fight, yeah.
I don't even remember what it was or what the details were. I
got angry at you about something.
Something happened.
And then I got angry at Brad.
Yeah.
And then Rachel got angry at me. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. And then all of a sudden we were all pissed off at each other. And I was like, and I don't even remember how I came to this conclusion, but I realized like, oh, someone's ego got pissed off, right? Someone's ego got triggered. And that was the first that was the first time I was introduced to that concept, that your ego could get triggered. And then that was what I really learned that at a deep level at Wanderlust when I was probably 17.
Yeah.
And I understood what happened, and it was just like a bell went off, moment of enlightenment. I was like, that's what it means. And that's what the emotional release they were talking about, right? We were all pent up, and it was really beautiful, actually, because we talked through it, and then all of a sudden we were closer because we grew through it. But yeah, I remember that. That was probably one of the big moments of.
We haven't talked about that one for a while.
I remember we ended up going. It was bad enough to where I think I like took off and avoided you for a little while and went back to our hotel room, and I remember journaling about it, but knew that we needed to deal with it and not just sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, by avoiding you mean avoiding me. Right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yeah. You were avoiding me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just remember that like I didn't like the way you had talked to Trinten, and I said something. Anyway, by the end of the night, we ended up all hanging out like in this little hammock area on these hammocks, and everybody it was like we had a heart circle without knowing that we were having a heart circle.
Right.
Everybody kind of opened up about what emotions they were feeling and how, maybe they could have done a better job. It was just such a beautiful experience. It was actually really cool.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember having this aha moment, like, oh, we did something here, like I understood what your guys' perspective were at a deep level, and I understand how my intention didn't impact you the way that I wanted it to, and I understood that. It was a meaningful moment. I don't really remember what it was in words, but I remember the significance of it, and
which is often the case, right?
Right.
We don't remember exactly what happened. We remember what we felt.
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments where me, you, your mom, Gabe, Rachel, Javen, I don't think Sam was there that time, but Javen was definitely there. And we had this unifying moment where like we all got together on the same page and we stopped looking at each other. We started looking at each other with love,
Right.
like just pure love. Oh, you love me. You're not running away. Even though we have conflict, you're not quitting.
Right.
That's the feeling that I had. Was
Right.
like, okay, we're gonna dig in on this. We're not gonna quit.
Yeah.
Well, what else about yoga? Like, you're a certified yoga instructor among all of your other accomplishments, which I talked about earlier. All of your other talents. What place does yoga play for you in your personal development?
Well, yoga originally took a seat. Well, it played a really crucial role in my life in getting me to be in a comfortable position with my body, because before that, me and my body were quite at odds. And a lot of times I didn't like physical activity, even though I was pretty athletic. I mean, I played soccer growing up.
You were great balance, like you were amazing skateboarder.
Yeah, I love skateboarding. I mean, I was pretty athletic, but I did not connect with my body. I actually despised my body for a really long time. So that was a whole lesson that I had to learn, how to love myself in that way. And then yoga then ultimately taught me the concept of self-love, and then unconditional love. Ultimately, after I got yoga teacher trained, I got my 200-hour yoga teaching certificate, and through that entire process, I could boil it down to the one concept of unconditional love is what I learned in that experience. And it's just opening yourself up to a whole nother world of energies that I'd had no idea was even there.
That was actually really cool too, because you did that with Gabe, your stepbrother.
Right.
And I feel like that was also a pivotal moment in your guys' relationship.
Definitely was. We grew closer through this really crazy situation that we got ourselves into. I really don't know exactly how we got there either. I remember Mom presenting to us the idea of getting yoga teacher certified. At this point in my life, I've been doing yoga, no intentions of teaching whatsoever. I thought the way you convinced me to go is just because I would learn how to deepen my own personal practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got there, and me and Gabe found ourselves in this situation where we drove 8 hours to Reno, Nevada, about something like that, and found this small yoga class with this really amazing woman, my teacher, Meg McCracken, and a group of 25 other females, middle-aged females. I was the youngest person in the room, and me and Gabe were one of the only males, some of the only males in the room.
Was there any other males?
There was
in your
one
class?
other male. His name was Bill. He was about 60. He could have been younger, but older guy. So there was our demographic. We were completely out of place, The only person that we could really connect with was each other, me and Gabe. So we grew really close through that, but also learned to open ourselves up to what it means to love unconditionally. To be loved and to love in that group of people was certainly unique. So that was a really cool stage in our life. We finished up our yoga teacher training in 2020, I think it was like February.
February. Yeah.
Yeah, February of 2020. Came home and it really changed us. It completely changed the trajectory of where I was going, like 100%. Learned some ideas and some concepts that I never would have learned otherwise. And I don't know if I would have made that same decision if I didn't have you guys to kind of guide me there. So.
And so how have you used, and we're not trying to sell anybody on yoga, but you use yoga so much.
Right.
How have you used yoga in your own healing?
A lot of ways. For example, it helps me with my back. It helps me because I, especially recently, deal with pain in my back from an injury that I had when I was young, where I stunted the growth plate in my right leg. And so it kind of tweaks my back a little bit. And yoga is a constant practice I have to kind of relieve some of the pain that I get in my back. That is how I use it now. I have one really small, really scientific, like I can point to that. And that's one of the reasons I use it. Yoga in itself is the unity of the mind, body, and spirit. And so it really encapsulate the sense of self, right? So being able to connect your mind and your body, your mind muscle connection, and then be able to connect to your sense of spirituality. It's a practice that I believe everyone should be engaged in. It's a way of life, the yogic way of life, being able to I don't even know.
A sense of introspection that
Right.
it's very hard to duplicate, and while you're physically moving the energy within your body.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of yoga as well. That's obviously why I've been a proponent for all of my family.
Right.
Because I'm with you, Trinten. I think it's a practice that everybody can benefit from. Literally everybody. I don't think there are any exceptions because it can be modified for any skill level. But more than anything, it's a practice of, like Trinten said, uniting.
Well, I also watch you when you're dealing with emotional issues. Like, you so often will come down and, like, whatever it is, whether it's dealing with an insecurity, dealing with some healing point, emotional healing. I watch you come talk to us and say, I need to go do yoga.
Right.
So you don't use it just for the physical healing.
No, it definitely processes emotion.
Yeah.
It pushes the energy around, just like you said, Mom, in a way that that really gets the gears turning, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It gets the energy moving.
Right.
Right. So rather than being stagnant, like whatever it is, being stagnant in your heart chakra and your shoulders and your back and your hips, wherever, you can move through it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a form of inner work. If you're doing yoga consciously, not just as an asana practice, you can tune in to where the energy is pent up. You can tune in to the emotion that you're experiencing, and you can process that emotion, meaning, where did the emotion come from? Allow yourself to feel the emotion, embrace the emotion, and process it to actually heal the root of what it is you're going through. And in the meantime, you have these downloads that come about, like, all of it and what to do next. And
I love watching you when you've been engaged in a practice come out, because you remind me so much of your mom, because you come out and you've got inspiration.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely do. It definitely, I relate in the sense that I get inspiration, or even downloads is the term that we have heard you use. Downloads about what steps to take, or
In anything,
in
right?
anything.
Yeah,
right?
whatever's troubling you.
Yeah, so divine inspiration for sure.
No.
For sure.
Well, we're getting close to an hour.
Right.
Trinten, what we've asked for your advice for kids that are going through it, but I'm really curious, like, what advice would you give parents, like, having seen us navigate it, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but overall, like, we've stuck through it. We're in this relationship. What advice would you give to parents that are trying to blend families together?
After talking through this conversation, I would just say patience. I really don't know what else really served us besides time, because it really took a full decade to get to where we are. Like, it's really hard to comprehend going through it, because I mean, I've really grown closer to my siblings in the last 5-6 years than I had in that entire time before.
Right.
Like it was exponential, but it was all of the growth and all of the work really was on that later half of that. So I mean, patience. I mean, I think things work out how they're going to work out. I mean, time heals all traumas, so
it can, right?
It can,
if you get purposeful about it. I love that patience idea. And you also, you went like this. I don't know if you saw yourself do this. It's this exponential growth. Right. One of our coaches calls it the hockey stick. So you're just going along, and then boom. And that's kind of what we've experienced, right?
Right.
Like, even from a relationship standpoint, if you were measuring the connectedness of our individual family members, it went here, and then woo, through the roof.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really good advice, because that's probably the number one piece of advice I give other step families getting together is you're going to have to do this a lot.
Right.
For a long time.
I would add consistency.
Yeah,
Patience
consistency too.
and
That's
consistency.
Right.
Like, keep getting your family together, keep having fun together, and be very consistent at that, and then just be patient. And watch it blossom.
Yeah. I mean, what I say, I've told you this a lot, Trinten. You've been such a great example in our family to your siblings. You're an incredible example. And if you have a Trinten type in your family that pushes you, that challenges you, be grateful for them. I don't like that, nobody has a favorite, or as a parent, you don't have favorites, but there are parts about each one of your kids that, man, without this, I would not be who I am today. And the way you accepted me, the way you've loved me, the way you've challenged me, has been such a key part of my own personal growth. And I will eternally be grateful for it, because you've really made me you're a big part of making me who I am today and the man I am today.
I appreciate that. I'd have to say the same. I've, as a male figure in my life, you've been pretty dominant through the last 10 years, and you've been a great example of a man to me. I really think that all the time. You taught me so many lessons about being true to your word, and about accountability. I mean, those are core things that I could definitely relate directly to you, that if you didn't come into my life, I don't know where else I would have learned those lessons from. So I feel like I owe everything I am to you guys. So
I love you.
Thanks.
Trinten is also, I feel like I could brag about you forever. Trinten is also a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He plays the guitar. We didn't even talk about that. I mean, we talked about you learning the guitar, but he's a phenomenal guitar player, a wonderful musician. He's like truly like when they talk about Renaissance men, like Trinten will fight you. Like if you get in a fight with Trinten, a physical fight, you're in trouble. And if you need to sit and talk about poetry or talk about art or listen to music, you've got a phenomenal companion to do that too. And
I think of Trinten as our little Buddha.
Yeah.
Like, he's just such a wise soul. And I just want to add, before we end this podcast, because we talked about patience, we talked about consistency, and I think another key component in having a successful blended family is we talked about it a little bit, but it truly is the unconditional love, and finding a way as a step parent to love your step kids, as a kid of a blended family to love all of your siblings and all of your parents, and really just as much as you can focus on love. But as the parent, you've got to be the example of that unconditional love and continuing to just teach from the place of love and compassion. It doesn't mean you don't address things, because you absolutely have to address. You're going to have conflict with your partner, with the kids, but if you can address it from this place of unconditional love and give them space and give them a voice, like allow them to express themselves and validate their feelings, I think that was also really huge for us.
Right. Yeah, I think that as the parents, you're setting the example for the kids, and just be aware of that. Back to the question of we started with like, are you doing your kids a favor by staying in a toxic marriage? And I really don't think that you are ever. You're never doing it, because really, you are your kids' only. You are your kids' only example of what leading a happy life is, right? And so if you are only so happy, if you are only living a halfway happy life, that is their only example of what a happy life looks like.
One of our mentors recently said, yes, that was beautiful. And it reminded me of something one of our mentors recently said in a training. He talked about like parents are literally bioengineers for these little people that they lead. Like everything that you say to them, even the way that you act around them, is feeding information into their psyche, and they are responding to that information that's being input into them. And I think we don't realize that, or we take that for granted as parents. We don't understand what we're doing to our kids by just the way that we're acting. And so and it doesn't mean that it's inevitable that you're going to screw your kids up, because like we just witnessed with you two, when you're able to take accountability and say, hey, like I can see that I was toxic to you because I was feeling this, then that like switches everything. That is the healing, is going back and doing that work,
Yep.
So while it's true, you give yourself grace. You're not going to be a perfect parent, but also be aware that you are the bioengineer for another human being.
Yeah.
Right.
Or maybe several, in our case, 8 human beings.
That's a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I thought this was pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Anything, Trinten, that's on your mind that you want to share before we log out for the night?
Nope. I think we're doing pretty cool things. I'm excited to where we're going in the future. I love working with you guys. I've been working with you since I was 16, 15, 14, if you count me junking out houses for discipline. But I mean, it's been a great journey. I'm really grateful for it. I feel blessed in so many different aspects of my life. And I really do have you guys to thank for that, for being such great mentors from the time I was a little kid. So you guys have provided an excellent foundation for me to go off and create whatever kind of life I see fit for myself. So thank you.
Awesome.
I think we can close on that.
Yes.
I love you, Trinten.
I love you so much, my little buddy.
This has been great. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and share. And feel free to send any questions or comments. If you have any questions or comments for Trinten, send them to us and we'll make sure he gets them. You can also follow him on social medias. He is Trinten Dunn. Yeah. But what's the Twilla and the other one?
Videographer?
Twilla Videography is what it is.
Twilla Videography.
Yeah, that's just my business one for now.
And he does so much with us. And so
if you're an agent that needs any listing photography or any social media videos or any kind of videos whatsoever, hit him up.
We let him work for other people now.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Or if you're looking he runs our Tru Studios podcast studio. And so if you're looking to record a podcast, also reach out to him.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
Till next time. This podcast is brought to you by the Tru Agency Real Estate Team. If you are looking to buy, sell, or especially right now, invest, by the way, you should be investing in real estate right now, contact us. Or if you're a real estate agent that is committed to personal growth, we need to talk. We are looking to grow our real estate team. So if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest, or you're a real estate agent and you need growth, contact us. Also brought to you by Tru Studios. If you are in Tooele County or nearby, we record, edit, produce, distribute all parts of your podcast. We give you the space, the time, the expertise so that you can have your own podcast. All you have to do is show up, be there, and then we handle everything else. So if you've always wanted to have a podcast, don't know how to start, don't know how to do it, get a hold of us. Reach out. You can reach out to us at Tru Studios or Tru Conscious Couple or Tru Agency Team. Reach out to me, reach out to Tiffany, reach out to Trinten. All of us are available. We would love to help you get that out. Thank you so much.